it is incredibly easy to forget just how much of our everyday lives, and especially our everyday language, is entirely dictated by what is happening millions of miles above our heads.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
Right. I mean, if you really sit down and think about it, the cosmos has completely infiltrated the way we speak to each other. Like, when you want something really, really badly, what do?
You wish on a star.
Exactly. You are wishing on a star.
Yeah.
Or, when you care deeply about someone, you look at them and tell them, you are my sunshine.
Yeah, that's a classic one.
We use these charming sort of star-dusted metaphors so effortlessly that we don't even realize we are referencing literal solar systems just to express our basic human emotions.
Well, it is second nature at this point. I mean, the planets, the stars, the sky, they have always formed the baseline vocabulary for the human experience.
Yeah, because they're universal.
Right, we look up to make sense of what is happening down here. And because humans have been looking at the exact same sky for thousands of years, those celestial observations just, get baked right into the foundation of how we communicate.
They really do.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one celestial phrase that is arguably more common than almost any other. I mean, you use it, I use it. Everyone listening right now has probably used it recently.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, and that phrase is once in a blue moon.
Ah, yes.
We all know what it means today, right? When you say something happens once in a blue moon, you are telling someone that it happens very, very rarely.
Highly infrequently. Right.
But here's the thing. Where does that actually come from? Like, why a blue moon?
It is a brilliant question. And usually, when you try to track down the exact origin of colloquialisms, it is a complete nightmare.
I bet. Language is so messy.
It's incredibly messy. Phrases just sort of evolve in the streets, meanings shift over generations, and the precise moment someone actually coins a term is often just lost to history entirely.
Right, nobody was writing it down.
Exactly. But this specific phrase leaves a surprisingly clear and frankly bizarre paper trail.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to trace the origin of once in a blue moon.
And it is quite a journey.
It really is. The goal here is to show you how this single everyday phrase that you probably throw around without a second thought is actually a collision of 16th century theological satire, explosive natural disasters, and honestly, a literal magazine typo.
It's a lot of moving parts.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where does the story officially begin? Because I know we have to go pretty far back in time for this one.
We do. We have to rewind all the way to the 1500s. Specifically, the earliest recorded mention of this concept in our sources is from the year 1528.
Wow, okay. 1528.
Yeah, and back then the phrase wasn't even once in a blue moon. It was simply the statement, the moon is blue.
Just the moon is blue. Just a flat statement of a rather strange fact.
Precisely. We find this expression anchored in a 1528 pamphlet written by two men. Their names were William Roy and Jeremy Barlow.
Okay, Roy and Barlow. What were they writing about?
Well, to understand the pamphlet, you have to look at the atmosphere of 16th century Europe. The entire purpose of this document was to serve as a challenge to the Roman clergy of that specific era.
Got it. So it was a religious critique.
Right. And just looking objectively at the historical context, during this period, the Roman Church expected its followers to accept church teachings without much question. They were demanding absolute adherence to their dogma.
So the pamphlet was essentially pushing back against that strict compliance, like it was a critique of blind authority.
Yes, exactly. Roy and Barlow were criticizing the idea that people should blindly believe whatever an authority figure tells them, even if it directly contradicts their own eyes and their own common sense.
That makes sense.
And to illustrate this point, they used a rather eloquent little couplet in their writing. The original 1528 text reads, and the spelling is a bit archaic here, it reads, "If they say the moon is blue, we must believe that it is true."
Wait, read that one more time.
If they say the moon is blue, we must believe that it is true.
If they say the moon is blue, we must believe that it is true. That actually has a really great rhythm to it.
It does, yeah.
So translated to modern English, it's just, if they say the moon is blue, we must believe that it is true.
Exactly.
That is amazing. It is essentially a 16th century viral diss track.
That's a great way to put it.
Or like a really good satirical meme, right? Before the printing press even really hit its stride, they're telling the public, look, if the clergy tells you the sky is green or that the moon is blue, you're just supposed to nod your head and agree.
That's the exact sentiment. And this brings us to a really critical distinction in the language. In the 1500s, saying the moon was blue did not mean it was rare.
Oh, really?
No, not at all. It meant it was categorically, fundamentally impossible. It signified an outright falsehood.
Ah, okay. So a blue moon was the ultimate symbol of nonsense.
Completely.
It was the benchmark for something that could never ever happen in physical reality.
It was the literal definition of an impossibility. Like, if someone told you the moon was blue, they were just lying to your face.
But wait, if it meant completely impossible back then, how on earth did it transition to the meaning we use today?
That is the big question.
Because when you or I say, once in blue moon today, we aren't saying something is impossible. We are saying it does happen. It's just, highly unlikely.
Right. It's a measure of rarity now, not impossibility.
Exactly. That is a massive linguistic leap. You don't just wake up one day and decide a word that means now means sometimes.
No, you don't. The language didn't change because people arbitrarily decided to update their dictionaries. The language shifted because reality itself shifted.
Wait, what do you mean?
I mean, the metaphor of the impossible was violently shattered by the physical world.
Okay, you have to explain that. How does the physical world shatter a metaphor?
It shatters it when the moon actually turns blue.
You're kidding.
No, I'm serious. There are two major historical events from our sources that caused a literal discoloration in the sky. And these events forced people to realize that this supposedly impossible thing was, in fact, possible under the right conditions.
Wow. Okay, what was the first event?
The first major shift occurred in the late 19th century. In 1883, the Krakatoa volcano erupted in Indonesia.
Oh, wow. That is one of the most famous, devastating volcanic explosions in recorded history.
It was earth-shattering. Literally, the sheer scale of the Krakatoa eruption pumped millions of tons of ash into the upper atmosphere.
Millions of tons. That's hard to even picture.
It really is. And this is where the mechanics of the atmosphere directly rewrite our language. The ash particles from Krakatoa were a very specific size. They were about 1 micron wide.
Okay, I have to stop you there. Why does the exact size of the ash matter at all?
Because of how light travels through the air, a 1 micron particle is roughly the exact wavelength of red light.
Okay, I think I see where this is going.
Right. So when the moonlight shone through this massive cloud of volcanic ash that was circling the globe, those specific particles acted like a giant filter.
Because of the 1 micron size.
Yes. They blocked and scattered the red light coming from the moon, but they allowed the blue light to pass straight through to the ground.
That is incredible.
It was like putting a massive blue theatrical gel over a stage spotlight. As a direct result, people all over the world looked up at the night sky and saw moons that were vividly, undeniably blue.
I really want you, the listener, to pause and picture that. You have a phrase that has meant impossible for over 300 years.
3 centuries of it meaning nonsense.
Right. It is the equivalent of saying, when pigs fly. And then one night in 1883, an Indonesian volcano erupts, coats the atmosphere in perfectly sized microparticles, and you step outside and see a glowing blue moon hanging right there over your house. Nature literally fact-checked a 300-year-old sarcastic poll.
What's fascinating here is how a physical natural disaster forces an immediate update to human colloquialisms. The impossible suddenly had a visual precedent. It wasn't a myth anymore.
That is wild. That's like if a freak tornado swept through a farm, picked up the livestock, and suddenly forced the phrase, when pigs fly, to mean a highly unlikely meteorological event instead of never.
That is a perfect analogy. The physical reality of the pale blue moon forced the language to adapt.
You literally have no choice but to change how you use the phrase at that point. You can't call it impossible if you're looking right at it.
Exactly. And Krakatoa wasn't the only time nature decided to play with the color of the sky either.
Really? There's another one.
Yeah. In 1951, massive wildfires broke out in Alberta, Canada.
Okay, so we go from volcanic ash to forest fire smoke. Does smoke do the same thing to light?
Under very specific, extreme circumstances, yes, it can. These fires were incredibly extensive, sending massive quantities of smoke high up into the stratosphere.
And it had that same filtering effect.
Just like the volcanic ash. The specific composition of that smoke contained oil droplets and particles that were, again, right around that magic 1 micron size.
The red light blocking size.
Precisely. They filtered out the red and yellow light, giving the moon a distinct pale blue tint all across North America.
So you have volcanic discolorations in the clouds in 1883 and huge quantities of wildfire smoke giving a pale blue tint in 1951.
Exactly right.
Both of these events proved that a blue moon was highly unlikely, sure, but still physically possible.
And that realization moved the needle of the phrase. It shifted the cultural meaning from impossible to rare. which, is exactly how we use it in everyday conversation today.
That completely explains the conversational use of the phrase. Like, it makes total sense that regular people would change their metaphor after looking up and seeing a blue sky through volcanic ash or wildfire smoke.
Right. It's a very natural linguistic evolution.
But there's a whole other side to this story.
Right.
Because blue moon isn't just an idiom we use at parties or in casual conversation.
No, it is not.
It is also an official term used in astronomy. Like, if I look at a calendar, it will literally mark a specific date as a blue moon.
It will, yeah.
So how did this chaotic, unpredictable, volcano-driven phrase end up becoming a rigid scientific definition?
Well, this is where the story pivots. We move away from atmospheric anomalies and head straight toward the printing press.
Okay, I am intrigued.
To understand the astronomical definition, we have to look at the almanacs. By the 19th century, publications like the Maine Farmer's Almanac began trying to formalize the term blue moons.
Almanacs were essentially the lifeblood of agriculture back then, right?
Yeah.
They were the ultimate reference guides for tracking weather, crop planting, and, the calendar.
They absolutely were. They tracked the seasons and the lunar cycles meticulously. And the Maine Farmer's Almanac actually created a very specific mathematical definition for a blue moon.
Okay, what was it?
They used the term to describe a year that has 13 full moons instead of the usual 12.
A 13-moon year. Okay, let's break down how that even happens for a second. Because a standard calendar year has 365 days.
Right.
But the moon doesn't operate on our calendar. A full lunar cycle is about, 29 and a half days?
Roughly, yes. So if you have 12 lunar cycles of 29.5 days, that only takes up 354 days.
Okay, doing the math. 365 minus 354. That leaves you with roughly 11 extra days each year.
Exactly. And over the course of 2 or 3 years, those extra 11 days add up. And eventually you end up squeezing a 13th full moon into a standard calendar year.
Okay, that part is straightforward enough. It is basically the lunar equivalent of a leap year.
It is. It's just orbital mechanics. But the almanac went further than that. They didn't just say a blue moon is the 13th moon of the year.
Wow.
No, they pinpointed exactly which moon was the blue one. The almanac specifically defined the blue moon as the third moon that appears in a season that has 4 moons.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I completely understand why a season might occasionally have 4 moons instead of 3, because of those extra days adding up.
Right.
But why in the world did they declare the third moon as the blue moon? Why not the fourth one? That feels needlessly complicated for a regular person who just wants to know what to call the moon.
It feels incredibly complex, but there is actually a mechanical logic to it. Think about how almanacs named moons historically.
Like the harvest moon or the hunter's moon?
Exactly. They had specific names for each moon based on the time of year. These names were deeply tied to the changing of the seasons and various religious observances.
So the last moon of a season had to happen right near the equinox or solstice to keep the naming system perfectly aligned.
Exactly. If a season suddenly had 4 moons instead of 3, it threw the entire naming convention into chaos. The dates wouldn't line up with the harvest or the holidays.
Ah, I see.
So to fix it, the almanac authors kept the first, second, and fourth moons of the season in their rightful, expected places with their proper names.
And they just isolated the extra one.
Right. They simply labeled that extra disruptive third moon as the blue moon. That way, the fourth moon could keep its traditional name and usher in the new season right on schedule.
I mean, that is a brilliant solution for a 19th century farmer, but it is a terrible solution for anyone trying to do quick mental math.
Oh, it's awful for mental math.
But the third moon of a season containing 4 moons. That is a very strict, pedantic way of categorizing the calendar.
It is incredibly convoluted, and the sheer complexity of that definition is exactly what led to the astronomical standard you and I use today.
Because the definition we use today has nothing to do with the third moon of a season. Like today, in the astronomical sense, a blue moon simply describes the second full moon in a single calendar month.
Which is much easier to track.
Yeah, way easier.
Yeah.
If we have a full moon on October 1st and another full moon on October 31st, we just call that second one the blue moon. It is so much simpler. Did astronomers eventually just decide to ditch the almanac math because it was too confusing?
No, astronomers didn't streamline it on purpose at all.
Wait, really?
Really. The modern definition you just described, it comes from a literal typo, a reading comprehension error published in a magazine in 1946.
Are you serious? A typo completely rewrote astronomical terminology.
It did. In 1946, a magazine called Sky and Telescope published an article titled Once in a Blue Moon. The author was an amateur astronomer named James Hugh Pruitt.
Okay, James Hugh Pruitt. What did he do?
Well, Pruitt was trying to explain the old 13-moon phenomenon to his readers, but he misread the convoluted Maine Farmer's Almanac rule.
I honestly do not blame him. I almost got lost when you were explaining it a minute ago.
Yeah.
What exactly did Pruitt write in the article?
So Pruitt wrote, 7 times in 19 years, there were and still are 13 full moons in a year. This gives 11 months with 1 full moon each and 1 with 2.
Okay, the math is tracking so far.
Right, but then he delivers the mistaken conclusion. He writes, this second in a month, so I interpret it, was called blue moon.
So I interpret it. He just guessed.
He literally just guessed.
He read the complicated rule about the third moon in a season of 4, got confused by the math, and interpreted it to mean the second moon in a single calendar month. And Sky and Telescope just published it.
They published it just like that. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that one article containing that one slight misinterpretation was read by the general public.
And they loved it because it was easy.
Exactly. Because Pruitt's accidental definition, the second moon in a month, was so much simpler to understand than the actual almanac definition, it caught on like wildfire. People naturally gravitate toward the simpler explanation.
Of course they do.
Over the following decades, that misprint became the universally accepted definition. Even modern astronomers use it today.
So what does this all mean? I really want you, the listener, to take a step back and look at the incredible journey we just went on during this deep dive.
It is pretty remarkable.
We set out to find the origin of once in a blue moon, a phrase you probably use without thinking twice about it. And what we found is a bizarre, centuries-long relay race.
A very chaotic relay race.
Right. It starts in 1528 with William Roy and Jeremy Barlow writing anti-clergy satire, using the blue moon as the ultimate symbol for something completely impossible.
A standard for absolute falsehood.
Then, the physical world steps in. The explosive ash of the Krakatoa volcano in 1883 filters the red light out of the sky.
Changing the visual reality.
Yeah. And the massive Canadian wildfires in 1951 do the exact same thing with oil-rich smoke. The moon literally turns a pale blue, forcing human beings to adapt and change the phrase from meaning impossible to meaning highly unlikely.
Language had to catch up to nature.
And finally, the almanacs try to organize this chaotic phrase into a rigid mathematical rule about seasons, only for a guy named James Hugh Pruitt in 1946 to misread the rule, publish his mistake in a magazine, and accidentally create the modern astronomical definition.
It really is an astounding chain of events.
From a 16th century diss track to a volcano to a typo, all for a phrase we use at the grocery store.
It highlights the deeply unpredictable nature of how knowledge is formed and passed down, which, brings up something I think is important to consider.
What's that?
When we think about the facts we rely on, we tend to assume they are built on solid, intentional foundations. But consider the fragility of our daily truths.
The fragility of truth. That's a heavy thought.
It is. We have just seen that a universally recognized scientific definition and one of the most common idioms in the English language are both essentially the result of a 300-year-old sarcastic joke and a 20th century reading comprehension error connected by volcanic ash.
It makes you wonder.
It really does. As you go about your week, look around at the absolute facts or the fixed definitions you rely on in your own life. How many of those unquestioned certainties are actually just the result of a forgotten historical typo or a random cloud of smoke?